Greetings, survivors and friends. SHADOWFRAX here with your weekly Rust update, where in this episode we have news on suits, charts, and craftable cars. But first, if you've ever tried to meet up with a friend in a strange new world and wished you had a better description of your exact whereabouts than by a tree next to a brown horse, then this first change will be right up your alley. Since the map is no longer craftable, the devs have a bit more freedom in upgrading its usefulness, and to start with, it now has a handy grid system which will let you describe the location of interesting things with some degree of accuracy. The squares are 150 meters aside, letters run horizontally and numbers vertically. It's a tiny bit janky at the moment with some artifacts when scrolling around, but you get the idea. This wasn't the only change though. Oh no indeed sir, in fact not only do shops correctly display whether they're selling items or just the blueprints now, but functionality was added for modders whereby radii of any size can be drawn on the map. Think Battle Royale. And now whenever a Heli or Bradley is murdered, everyone will know exactly where it is thanks to an explosion marker that will appear wherever it just happened. This should be interesting. We had some big changes last week, of course, with the new blueprints and workbench system, but despite making it abundantly clear that it was going to need a few weeks of balancing and tweaking, there were a lot of dummies thrown out of prams. Anyway, this week Helk's been playing the game a lot, and so we have our first round of adjustments. Workbench radius has been increased threefold, so now you have extra long arms and can work on crafting things without having to have your balls resting on the counter. A couple of exploits were fixed that allowed access to the workbench anywhere on the server and people to be able to use yours through the walls of your base. And you can also now rotate them with your hammer, just in case you manage to put them down back to front, you idiot. There's currently an internal debate about the length of crafting times, and I guess a lot of people have become accustomed to instant gratification, which doesn't help, but just know that this could change. There's even a possibility of a type of mini-game that could speed things up, but nothing is carved in stone at the moment. Another really big change this week, and one that should massively help out the environment, is that you can now pick up most objects that people are either lazy or stupid enough to leave lying around outside of covered radius. Hopefully the lure of free recycling resources and deployables will help the players on a server to keep Rust Island tidy. Also on this subject, recycling ratios were upped a bit to give you more return on broken items, as not being able to repair them without a blueprint meant that they were potentially a bit of a waste of space. In addition, the amount of rope in sewing kits was halved. Also, there were a couple of other deployables that became pick-upable inside your bases, namely the repair and research benches. A very handy change, I'm sure you'll agree. The new workbenches can't be moved yet though, and there's a reason for this. Just like in all good zombie survival situations, large, difficult to destroy items of furniture make great barricades when placed in front of doors, and a solution to this potentially OP exploit is being sought before this functionality is added. Over at the launch site now, and there are a few changes and nerfs here this week. First of all, Bradley now respawns once every hour rather than every 20 minutes. This was in response to changes to his loot table that means he now carries the equivalent of 3 elite tier crates. The amount of ammo he drops was reduced to make room for other items, and his health regen was slowed, so it will now take 10 minutes for him to start healing, with a further 5 to reach full health. Secondly, hazmat suits have sprung a small leak and will no longer give 100% protection if you're in the highest radiation zones. This means that the top of the launch site and indeed the cooling tower at the power plant are no longer suitable places for long-term camping. In addition to this, there's one less elite crate at the launch site. They now contain half as many items and respawn every 2 hours instead of every 20 minutes. Hopefully these changes balance the risks and rewards of the launch site a bit better, but there will no doubt be more changes in the coming weeks. Airdrops were balanced too to be much less likely to spawn good guns such as rifles and SMGs, and much more likely to give you stuff like shotties and ammunition. This is an attempt to aim this sort of event towards lower tiered players, with the launch site remaining geared towards more geared clans. Cave loot tables also received an overhaul, with fewer mining and candle hats containing less low grade. There was far too much of the stuff down there. Talking of which, high qual metal quantities were toned down a bit too. You'll now find 1 to 2 at a time rather than 5, and instead of quite so many salvage tools, you'll stand a much better chance of finding the stone equivalents. Over to blueprints, and a first pass was made which saw stone spears and water purifiers become default, and ceiling lights, guitars, planters, hoodies and pants all moved to lower scrap scrap tiers. Flamethrowers now require a level 2 bench to craft instead of a level 1, and snow and vagabond jackets now cost 50 cloth instead of 1 to 200 each. You'll also start finding some actual blueprints in barrels and crates now, but only for some of the simpler, more mundane items, mind. This should again help with keeping the island tidy, but also means you'll be able to learn more of them without having to waste any scrap. There was an issue with resource spawning that was highlighted by a player on Reddit this week. Basically, what was happening was that when one particular type of node was harvested more than the others, that resource became scarcer and scarcer. This was obviously not good and explains why finding stone sometimes could be such a pain in the arse. In response to this, the spawn handler was adjusted to ensure the correct distribution of resources at all times. Hopefully. In fixes now, and for some reason Peacekeeper mode on turrets was broken. This has since been resolved. There was an issue that appeared last week preventing Steam items like town signs and picture frames from being craftable. This is also now sorted. High external wall placement became a bit easier thanks to an increase in the number of useful placements that should enable you to complete compound perimeters much more easily. A server DOS exploit that could bring down servers by getting them to spam messages into their log file was discovered and eliminated with a new convar debug.log that can be toggled to completely disable server logging at runtime. Lanterns and tuna can wall lights now emit a lot more light and are cheaper to craft, meaning there's no excuse to be fumbling around and stubbing your toes on storage crates anymore. And it was discovered that thanks to an extra zero that managed to work its way into the code somehow, candle hats were accidentally the second brightest source of light in the game after the spotlight. You should now notice them being a lot dimmer, and a bug was also fixed that meant when worn, the emissive part would appear on at all times to other players, thus turning you into a sniper's dream. Miners' hats received a tweak too that means pointing them at other players will blind them now. This could be good or bad depending on the situation, and protection values for both these hats as well as boonies, caps and bandanas were increased as of this update. I forgot to mention last week that there's a new stats page which gives you a lot of funky coloured information about Rust, and I'll leave a link to it in the description for you, so if you've ever wondered how many refunds there have been or how many are still playing on Windows XP, then now you can know. Graphically now, this week saw all of the view model cleanup work being merged along with the new arms, and although you probably wouldn't have noticed anything unless I just told you, what this does all mean is that these are now in a very happy place when it comes to working on your clothes being visible in first person. No date on this happening yet, but stay tuned and I'll let you know. There was a bug that was producing some strange artifacts on water reflections. Hopefully this is now fixed, and last week's view model shadow fixes had the knock-on effect of producing a new bug, as you can see here. Everything should be back to normal now. In work in progress, hair is still not quite ready. This week the shader was improved to add support for all anti-aliasing modes, and hopefully soon everything should start falling into place. Iceberg wise, not much to report either, mainly texturing work and blending techniques. Here's a look at some fully textured examples. The new craftable hazmat suit model, which will be essential to differentiate us from those technologically superior and ultimately better funded scientists, is starting to come together nicely. It will look a lot rougher and much duct tape will be involved in its construction when finished. And finally, and perhaps most excitingly, temporary art models for modular vehicles are currently being sculpted on a separate branch. If you've seen my concept limbo on vehicles, you'll know what this is all about, but to recap, it was all the way back in July of 2015 that these were first concepted, and the idea is that instead of a fixed model like the sedan, some different size chassis can be built upon with modules to make all sorts of Frankenstein's monster trucks, perhaps with cages or turrets on the back, for instance. There's obviously a lot of work to do here. Rome wasn't built in a day, and much could change, but do stay tuned and I shall keep you firmly up to date with whatever I know. Please help to support and grow my channel by liking and subscribing. Also be sure to follow me on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook and my Steam group. I shall catch you all in my next vid or stream, but until then, keep calm and stay rusty. Cheerio.